I never thought I'd feel invisible in my own home. Not like this. My husband had stopped seeing me months ago. Not in the literal sense. He'd walk past me every morning, grunt some half-formed goodbye, but he stopped seeing me as a woman, as someone worth pausing for. Our bedroom felt like a hallway, cold, functional, and silent. That silence became a background hum I lived in until he came home from college. My stepson. He was polite, always had been, kept to himself, barely caused trouble. But something was different this time. He'd grown in presence in the way he carried himself and in the way he looked at me. The first time I felt it, I was folding laundry, bent over, sorting socks, when I sensed someone behind me. I turned around quickly. He was there pausing too long, his eyes not on my face. He blinked fast, muttered an apology, and left the room. I told myself I imagined it, that I was desperate for attention, reading into things, but it didn't stop. He'd sit close on the couch, closer than necessary. He'd hover a little longer in the kitchen when I was there. Our hands brushed once while passing the salt, and he didn't flinch. He looked straight at me. Am unapologetic, curious. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was lonely, not blind, that a young man noticing his stepmother didn't mean anything. I'm not even sure he knew what he was doing at first, but I knew what I felt. Not just in my skin, but deep real. My husband barely noticed when I started wearing more makeup around the house. When I traded sweatpants for looser summer dresses, his eyes stayed on his phone, but my stepson noticed. He'd glance once, twice, hold the stare if I didn't catch him right away. When I did, he'd smile slightly like we shared a secret. One afternoon, I caught him looking at me while I watered the plants on the patio. I wore a tank top. No bra. It was hot and I didn't expect anyone home. I looked through the glass and there he was standing by the fridge, sipping from a bottle, eyes locked on my chest. I turned away, flushed, heart pounding. But I didn't cover up. I stayed out there longer, pretending to water a plant that didn't need it. That night, lying next to my husband, I couldn't sleep. My body felt charged, restless. Not because of what had happened, but because of what didn't. I hadn't stopped him. I hadn't pulled back. And worse. I liked that he was watching. Over the next few days, the air shifted. It was never verbal. He didn't say anything suggestive, but there was a charge between us unspoken, but thick. One evening, I was making dinner when he came up behind me to reach for a glass. His arm brushed mine, just skin, but I felt it in my spine. Neither of us moved away quickly. My hands trembled slightly as I stirred the pot. At dinner, my husband asked about work, barely listening to the answer. My stepson, however, noticed. He laughed at my jokes. He listened. When I mentioned I used to dance, his eyes lit up. Really? He said, you still look like you could. My fork paused midair. I met his eyes. He didn't look away. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and really looked at myself. My skin wasn't as firm as it used to be, and the years had settled around my eyes. But I didn't look bad. I looked like a woman who missed being wanted. A woman slowly waking up. The next day, I found myself picking out a dress I hadn't worn in years. Light fabric, low cut, not indecent, but not modest either. I wore it casually, like I didn't think about it, but I did. Every thread. He noticed. He was sitting at the table scrolling on his phone. His eyes flicked up, then back down, then up again, longer this time. He said nothing, but his silence said enough. I walked past him slowly. Felt his eyes trace my back, my legs. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. Later, he asked if I could help him with laundry. Something about the settings on the machine. I stood next to him in the narrow space of the laundry room. Our shoulders touching slightly. I explained the buttons. He leaned closer. Got it, he said. His voice was low, closer to a murmur than a word. I could smell him soap, shampoo, something warm underneath. I stepped back just a little, enough to breathe. That evening, my husband fell asleep early. Hivan snoring faintly. I walked past my stepson's room and saw the door cracked open. He was lying on the bed, one arm behind his head, earbuds in. He looked up when I passed, gave me a lazy half-smile. Pause. Can't sleep? He asked, pulling out one earbud. I shook my head. No, he nodded as if he understood more than I'd said. I walked away without another word, but my heart was racing. I knew something had started. Not an affair, not yet, but something real. Something shifting under the surface. I was being tested, pushed slowly, deliberately, and I hadn't pushed back, not once. He started staying up later. I'd find him in the kitchen at midnight, shirtless, drinking water straight from the bottle. He'd pause when I entered, eyes dragging across my body with no urgency to look away. There was no pretense now. No accidental glances. He knew I saw him. I knew he didn't care. I stopped pretending to. If I heard him moving around late, I'd slip on something thinner, more revealing. Nothing obvious, but I made sure the fabric clung when it needed to. I moved slower, bent lower. Every gesture had weight. One night, I walked in on him, standing at the sink, back turned, wearing just sweatpants. He didn't flinch when I spoke, just turned casually, the waistband riding low. His eyes trailed down my body, paused at my hips, then returned to my face like it was normal. I felt heat rise through my chest, but I didn't leave. I poured myself water, sipped slowly. Neither of us said much. We didn't have to. I started anticipating him, listening for his steps, timing my movements. There was a pattern to our silence, a rhythm. We were circling each other. I caught him staring again one afternoon while I stretched on the floor. I pretended not to notice even though my shirt lifted slightly. I stayed in the position longer than needed. When I finally sat up, he was watching openly, leaning against the door frame. No words, just watching like he wanted to see how far I'd go. The way he looked at me was different from anyone else ever had. It wasn't just desire. It was focused, intentional, like he wanted to see what would break me first. His eyes are my own need. At dinner, he made small remarks that walked the line. Compliments buried in innocent tones. You look really nice today. That color suits you. My husband never noticed. He barely noticed when I didn't eat much. Didn't talk much, just nodded while the two of them discussed sports. But the stepson's knee touched mine under the table once then twice, lingering a second longer each time. I didn't move it away. In the living room, he sat beside me instead of on the other couch. My husband had dozed off. The boy shifted closer, the side of his thigh brushing mine. He asked what I was watching. I don't even remember what I said. His attention was on my mouth. Felt it. I felt all of him next to me and not once did he lean back. Later that night, I opened my laptop and tried to distract myself. I read news, checked emails. I couldn't focus. The house was quiet. I heard footsteps outside my door, then nothing. A shadow under the crack. He lingered there for a moment, then moved away. The next morning, I found a folded towel in the laundry basket. I hadn't touched one of mine. He had done it. I didn't ask him to. I didn't need to. The gesture was deliberate, intimate, like he was slowly claiming space in my daily life. One small touch at a time. That evening, he sat at the kitchen table, flipping through his phone. I walked past him to grab something and felt his gaze burn across the back of my legs. He didn't stop when I turned around. He met my eyes with a calm, steady expression, like he was daring me to acknowledge it. I didn't speak. I just held the gaze for one long, loaded moment, then left the room. My dreams turned vivid. I started waking up at night, sheets tangled, skin damp, pulse racing. My body wasn't just responding, it was craving, the kind of craving I hadn't felt in years. Not with my husband, not even alone. I was alive in a way I hadn't been since before the marriage began to rot. One night, I passed by his room while heading to the kitchen. His door was slightly open again. The light from his lamp spilled into the hallway. He was sitting up back against the headboard, shirtless again, reading something. He looked up when he heard me. Neither of us said a word. I paused, heart beating so loud I thought he'd hear it. His eyes dropped briefly to my bare legs, then returned to mine, kept walking. In the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection and didn't recognize the expression I wore. It wasn't shame. It wasn't even hesitation. It was hunger, controlled, contained, but real. The testing didn't stop. Escalated. He found reasons to touch me. Handing me something, brushing fingers, moving past me in tight spaces. Once he placed his hand on the small of my back as I reached for something high. It was subtle, barely a second, but my knees almost gave out. I knew then I was no longer being tested. I was responding. There was a moment in the garage. We passed each other closely. He looked at me and this time I stopped, just stood there. Neither of us moved. His eyes dropped to my lips. Mine stayed locked on his. We were only inches apart. He said quietly, "You're not stopping me." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence between us was thicker than ever. Words would have broken it. Words would have ruined everything. The next day, my husband asked if I was coming to bed early. I said I had laundry to fold. He grunted. Didn't look up. Downstairs. My stepson was already there, sitting at the table, shirt off again, like it meant nothing. I said nothing, just started folding clothes slowly. He watched me, quiet, intense. I dropped a shirt. He bent down to grab it at the same time I did. Our hands touched, stayed there. He didn't pull away. I didn't either. When we stood, we were too close. He leaned in slightly. I didn't stop him. I turned and left the room without speaking. Not because I was unwilling, but because I knew I'd already failed the test. And so had he. There was no more guessing. No more doubt. It wasn't about if. It was when. The house was quiet. Rain tapped against the windows, steady and rhythmic. My husband was gone for the night. Some work retreat he barely mentioned until the day before. He didn't ask if I'd be okay. He assumed. He always did. I stayed downstairs longer than usual. He was in the living room scrolling on his phone. The silence between us wasn't tense anymore. It was charged. Every glance held weight. Every movement held an invitation. I sat near him, not beside him, close enough to be noticed. His eyes flicked to my legs, then my collarbone, then back to his screen. Waited. Let the air stretch between us until the tension became too loud to ignore. He broke it. "You always smell like vanilla," he said. Quiet. Not flirtation. Observation. I turned slightly. "You always notice." He looked at me straight. No hesitation. "You want me to?" My breath caught. My fingers curled around the edge of the cushion. There was no reason left to pretend. My body had already decided. My mind had stopped resisting days ago. This was inevitable. Stood. He followed without a word. His fingers touched my wrist first. Just that. But I felt it all the way through. I didn't stop him. I didn't say anything. He couldn't. My pulse was louder than my thoughts. When his touched mine, it wasn't gentle. It wasn't rough. It was deliberate, like he'd imagined it 100 times. And now he was finally allowed to follow the script in his head. It matched it. Every inch of restraint I had fell away. The guilt didn't shout. It whispered and I ignored it. His hands weren't tentative. He wasn't clumsy. He touched me like he already knew what I liked. Like he'd been studying every inch of me in silence, learning my patterns, my weaknesses. When I pulled his shirt off, I didn't feel shame, felt control, power. I was the one choosing this. I was the one letting go. My skin lit up with every touch, every kiss, every graze of breath. Forgot time. I forgot rules. I forgot who I was supposed to be. My body responded before my mind could catch up. When he moved over me, when I pulled him closer, I didn't think about tomorrow. I didn't think about what this made me. I just felt, and what I felt was hunger. Had been years since I felt wanted like that. Years since someone looked at me like I was the only thing they saw, like I was worth breaking rules for, worth risking everything for. We didn't speak. Our mouths were too busy saying everything in silence. His breath on my neck, his grip on my hips, the way he whispered my name like he was claiming it. The sheets tangled. My heartbeat stuttered. My body opened. Invited. Took everything he gave and asked for more. And when it ended, we didn't move. Not right away. I lay there, chest rising, skin damp, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had just changed everything or revealed something that had always been true. He reached for my hand. Let him. It wasn't love, but it wasn't nothing. It was a breaking point. I didn't feel regret immediately. What I felt was stillness, like my body had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. We didn't speak much. He touched my leg lightly, traced a line with his finger like he wasn't ready to let go of the moment. I closed my eyes and let him. When I got up, the room felt different. Not dirty, not sacred, just changed. I slipped into the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror. My lips were swollen. My hair a mess. I didn't look guilty. I looked alive. Back in my room, the bed was still made. My husband's side untouched, like he hadn't existed all night, like the only person who had touched me in years was the boy down the hall. I lay there staring into the dark. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because I didn't want to. Morning came too quickly. I walked into the kitchen and found him already there making coffee. He looked at me and didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered. They searched for something. Maybe reassurance. Maybe permission to still want me. I didn't flinch. I didn't avoid him. I poured my coffee and our fingers brushed again. This time we both smiled. Just slightly. Just enough. We didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. There was no morning after awkwardness. Just a quiet mutual knowing, a shared shift in reality. We had crossed the line and we were both still standing, but something had changed. Not just between us. Inside me, I didn't feel like his stepmother anymore. And he didn't treat me like one. The aftermath wasn't loud. It settled like dust. Quiet but undeniable. Everything felt slightly different. He moved around the house with the same calm, but now there was a current under every look. A memory layered into the space between us. We didn't speak of it. But the silence wasn't avoidance. It was understanding. The next few days blurred. I noticed the small ways things changed. He lingered closer. His hands brushed mine without hesitation. His eyes didn't ask for permission anymore. They assumed it. My husband returned oblivious as ever. He dropped his bag in the hallway, barely said hello, asked what was for dinner. I smiled and told him, my voice steady, my face composed. I played the part I'd worn for years. Only now I knew how hollow it was. We sat at the table that night, 3 of us, like nothing was different. But under the table, our knees touched. Reef, warm, intentional. I didn't move. I held my fork, nodded at my husband's story, and pressed back. The duality didn't crush me. Clarified things. I wasn't confused. I wasn't torn. I saw both sides clearly. One was numb comfort, the other reckless clarity. He didn't say much around his father. He never did. But his eyes stayed on me longer than they used to. The tension had shifted from potential to memory, and that made it even heavier. That night, I heard my husband snore beside me, unaware of what had unraveled in his absence. I turned on my side and stared at the wall, not out of guilt, but because I had nothing left to feel for him. The betrayal didn't ache. It confirmed what I already knew. There was no marriage left to protect. I began to change without saying it out loud. I dressed better, spoke less, much more. My world had shrunk into sharper focus. Every time I passed my stepson, I caught a breath. Not because I was scared, but because I remembered. One afternoon, he touched my wrist in the hallway, stopped me. "Are we okay?" he asked. Just that. I nodded once. Yes. He studied my face like he didn't fully believe me. But I didn't explain. I didn't owe him reassurance. What happened was real. It didn't need constant validation. We didn't repeat it right away. But we could have. Every time we were alone, the option sat between us like a loaded question. It wasn't a mistake. It was a shift. We'd crossed something and now had to live in what had changed. My husband didn't notice. Not when I stopped touching him. Not when my laughter faded. Not when I left the bedroom at night claiming I couldn't sleep. He never asked what was wrong. He never reached for me. The emotional absence was so normal. He never questioned it. That gave me freedom. I started building a version of myself that no longer needed his approval. I moved through the house like it was mine alone. My stepson saw it. His eyes followed it. He started helping more, taking out trash, cleaning dishes without being asked. He was inserting himself into the space between my silence and my control. Not out of guilt, out of presence. We had another moment days later. Quiet one. Reef. We passed each other in the laundry room again. Turn. He paused. The tension snapped tight. My breath caught. He leaned in slower this time, searching for resistance. I didn't give it. We $D again. Not hungry, not desperate, just inevitable. I pulled away first, not because I wanted to stop, but because I didn't want it to become casual. It wasn't an affair anymore. It was power, ownership of what had been ignored in me for too long. He didn't complain. He understood. He stepped back, gave me space. That restraint told me more than any words could. I began imagining leaving. Not because of him, because of me. The marriage had rotted from the inside. What I did only exposed what was already hollow. I started saving money. Quietly, pulling bits from grocery cash, returns, little amounts that wouldn't be noticed. I hid them in a box behind books I knew my husband would never touch. My stepson noticed the shift before I told him. He watched me with something new. Respect mixed with curiosity. Not because I was his father's wife, but because I had stepped into control of myself. We didn't speak of the future. We didn't plan anything reckless, but we didn't avoid each other either. The energy stayed crackling in silence and small glances in the way we occupied the same space without apology. Then one day I told him, I'm leaving him. I didn't ask what he thought. I didn't wait for approval. He looked at me steady. Good, he said. Nothing more. That was all I needed. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about escape. It was about ending something that had expired years ago. What started as an act of betrayal had led me to something far more honest than the life I was pretending to live. The night I packed a small bag. My husband didn't ask questions. I said I was staying with a friend. He barely looked up from his phone. I stared at him for a full 10 seconds before walking out. He never even noticed the door shut. Outside, my stepson waited in his car. He didn't say anything when I got in. He just reached out and took my hand. His fingers were warm. Teddy, I didn't cry. I didn't look back. I wasn't running away from something. I was finally walking toward myself.